If someone had told me 3 years ago that the two people I trusted more than anyone else would destroy my life in a single evening, I would have laughed in their face. I believed in loyalty. I believed in love. And more than anything, I believed that the people closest to me would never become the reason I stopped recognizing the girl in the mirror. But life has a cruel sense of humor. It doesn't warn you before it changes everything. It doesn't send signs written in the sky. Sometimes it simply waits until you're smiling your happiest smile, then pulls the floor out from under your feet. My name is Emily, and this is the story of how the man I planned to marry walked away holding my best friend's hand, and how years later he had to call me ma'am every single morning. If you've ever been betrayed, don't skip this story, because I promise you, revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's wearing a tailored suit, sitting in the CEO's office, and signing someone's performance review. Back then, my life looked almost perfect from the outside. I was 27, working as a junior marketing coordinator at a fast-growing tech company, living in a cozy apartment that I decorated myself with second-hand furniture and cheap plants that somehow refused to die. I wasn't rich, I wasn't famous, but I was happy. Or at least I thought I was. Every Friday after work, my boyfriend Ryan would pick me up, we'd order greasy takeout, watch terrible reality shows, and make fun of the contestants like we were professional critics. We had been together for 4 years. 4 years of birthdays, vacations, family dinners, lazy Sundays, arguments over whose turn it was to wash dishes, and conversations about the future. We had even picked baby names once. Not because we were expecting, but because we loved imagining what our life would become. Looking back now, I wonder if he was already lying to me while talking about those dreams. And then there was Sophie, my best friend since college. She was the kind of person who could make friends in a grocery store checkout line. Loud, confident, effortlessly beautiful. While I overthought every sentence before speaking, Sophie said whatever came into her mind. She used to joke that together we made one functional adult because she had confidence and I had common sense. We spent nearly every weekend together. Ryan knew her almost as well as I did. Sometimes he'd tease that he was dating both of us because Sophie was always around. We'd laugh. I'd laugh the hardest. Funny how memories can become painful once you know the ending. The strange thing about betrayal is that it never starts with one giant moment. It begins with tiny details your brain quietly stores away, but your heart refuses to believe. Ryan suddenly became protective of his phone. Sophie started canceling girls' nights because she was busy. Ryan mentioned Sophie in conversations more often than before. Sophie asked strange questions about our relationship. "Do you guys ever fight?" She'd ask casually while sipping coffee. "Are you sure Ryan is really happy?" At the time, I thought she cared about us. I actually thanked her for looking out for my relationship. God, I wish I could go back and shake that version of myself. About 2 months before everything exploded, Ryan started working late almost every evening. His company had supposedly landed a huge client, and everyone was putting in overtime. I never questioned him, because I knew what career pressure felt like. While he was working, I stayed home, cooked dinner, folded laundry, and waited. Sometimes, he'd come home smelling like expensive perfume that definitely wasn't mine. When I asked about it, he'd smile and say someone hugged him at work after closing a deal. I accepted every explanation because trust makes you blind. People think love blinds you. No, trust does. Sophie became even more supportive during that time. She'd bring me ice cream when Ryan canceled dates. She'd tell me I deserved better treatment, while secretly being the reason I wasn't getting it. Imagine comforting someone while causing the pain they're crying about. That's a level of deception I still struggle to understand. One Saturday afternoon, Sophie convinced me to go shopping. She insisted I needed a new dress because Ryan had planned a surprise dinner for our anniversary the following weekend. I remember trying on a navy blue dress and asking her if Ryan would like it. She smiled and said, "Trust me, he won't be able to take his eyes off you." Looking back, I wonder if she was trying to ease her own guilt. Maybe guilt makes people unusually kind right before they betray you. A week later came our anniversary. I spent hours getting ready. I curled my hair 3 different times because the first 2 attempts weren't perfect. I wore the blue dress Sophie helped me choose. Ryan texted saying he's held meet me directly at the restaurant because he was finishing something important at work. Everything seemed normal. When I arrived, the hostess looked confused. "Table for Ryan?" I asked. She frowned. "I'm sorry, that table already has guests." I smiled awkwardly. There must be a mistake. "He's expecting me." She checked again. "Actually, he's already here." I remember feeling relieved. Maybe he had arrived early. Maybe this surprise dinner was actually happening. The hostess pointed toward the private dining section. As I walked closer, I heard laughter. Ryan's laugh, Sophie's laugh. For a split second, I smiled because I assumed she was helping him plan some anniversary surprise. Then I turned the corner. Ryan wasn't sitting across from me. He was sitting beside Sophie. His hand rested on hers. And before my brain could process what I was seeing, he kissed her. Not a friendly kiss. Not an accidental moment. A slow, familiar kiss between two people who had done it many times before. Everything around me became strangely quiet. People were talking. Glasses were clinking. Music was playing. But I couldn't hear any of it. Ryan looked up first. The color disappeared from his face. Sophie's smile vanished instantly. Neither of them stood. Neither of them ran after me. Neither of them even looked ashamed. Ryan simply sighed, like I had interrupted an inconvenient conversation. "Emily." Just hearing him say my name made my stomach turn. I asked only one question. "How long?" Silence. I asked again. "How long have you been together?" Ryan rubbed the back of his neck before answering. 8 months. 8 months. 8 months. They had stolen almost an entire year of my life while pretending to love me. Every girls' night, every double dinner, every birthday, every holiday, every hug, every smile, every single memory suddenly became contaminated. I looked at Sophie. She couldn't even meet my eyes. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't mean for it to happen." I laughed. Not because anything was funny, because my heart had shattered so completely that laughing was easier than crying. "You didn't mean for 8 months to happen?" She stayed silent. Ryan stood up. I wasn't happy anymore. Those 6 words hurt more than catching them together. Because if he wasn't happy, why didn't he leave? Why lie? Why let me keep planning a future that no longer existed? Why let me tell my parents he was the one? Why let me dream? He actually had the nerve to say, "You deserve someone better." Amazing how cheaters always become philosophers after they're caught. I quietly took off the silver promise ring he had given me 2 years earlier, placed it on the table, looked at both of them, and said something that even surprised me. "I hope one day you experience exactly what you've done to me." Then I walked away. I didn't scream. I didn't throw drinks. I didn't slap anyone. I simply left. Sometimes silence is louder than any revenge. That night I cried until sunrise. The next morning I couldn't recognize the swollen face staring back from the bathroom mirror. I called work pretending I had food poisoning. The truth was much worse. My heart had become physically too heavy to carry. I thought the hardest part would be surviving the breakup. I was wrong, because I had no idea that losing Ryan was only the beginning. Within days, I would lose my apartment, my closest friends, my confidence, and eventually, everything I had worked so hard to build. I didn't know it yet. But the people who betrayed me weren't finished destroying my life. The first week after I caught Ryan and Sophie together felt like living underwater. Every movement was slow. Every breath hurt. I woke up every morning hoping the previous week had been a nightmare, only to remember the truth before my eyes were even fully open. The apartment felt different without Ryan's shoes by the door, without his coffee mug sitting in the sink, without his terrible singing in the shower. Funny how the smallest things become the loudest reminders when someone disappears. People say heartbreak gets easier with time, but they never talk about those first few days when simply getting out of bed feels like climbing a mountain with broken legs. I stopped answering phone calls. I ignored text messages. Friends reached out, but I wasn't ready to explain what had happened. I didn't want pity. I didn't want people choosing sides. I especially didn't want to hear the words everyone says after betrayal. "You deserve better. Everything happens for a reason. Time heals all wounds." None of those sentences help when your entire future has just been erased. Ryan finally came by 3 days later to collect the rest of his things. I stayed in the bedroom while he packed. I could hear drawers opening, hangers scraping across the closet rod, boxes being taped shut. 4 years together, reduced to cardboard boxes and awkward silence. Before leaving, he knocked softly on my bedroom door. "Emily, can we talk?" I didn't answer. "I know you're angry." Still silence. "I'm sorry." That word echoed through the apartment like an insult. Sorry. People think saying sorry repairs broken trust. It doesn't. Sorry doesn't erase lies. Sorry doesn't give back lost years. Sorry certainly doesn't erase 8 months of cheating. After standing there for almost a minute, he quietly walked away. The front door closed. And just like that, the man I thought I'd marry became a stranger, carrying boxes down the hallway. I thought things couldn't get worse. Life proved me wrong. The following Monday I returned to work, determined to bury myself in deadlines and presentations. I figured work would distract me. Instead, it became another battlefield. The moment I stepped into the office, conversations stopped. People looked away too quickly. A few coworkers whispered. One woman I barely knew gave me a sympathetic smile. At first I assumed Ryan had told people about the breakup. Then my coworker Melissa approached me carefully. "Emily, are you okay?" "I've been better." She hesitated. "Have you seen social media?" My stomach tightened. "No." She handed me her phone. There it was. A smiling picture of Ryan and Sophie sitting together at a rooftop restaurant. Caption: "Sometimes love finds you when you least expect it. Grateful for new beginnings." Over 8,000 likes. Hundreds of comments. Perfect couple. Finally official. You two belong together. True love always wins. True love. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. No one knew the truth. To everyone else, they were just another happy couple. I was simply the ex-girlfriend who had quietly disappeared. Then I noticed something even worse. Sophie had blocked me. Ryan had blocked me. They announced their relationship to the entire world before I even had the chance to process mine ending. That afternoon I locked myself in the restroom and cried as quietly as possible. I washed my face 3 times before returning to my desk. No one said anything. Sometimes silence from other people feels heavier than questions. Over the next month, my life continued falling apart piece by piece. Ryan's name was still on our apartment lease. Without his income, I couldn't afford the rent alone. I begged the landlord for extra time. He apologized, but explained that business was business. Within 6 weeks, I packed everything I owned into borrowed boxes and moved into a tiny studio apartment across town. It had cracked windows, a leaking kitchen faucet, and barely enough space for my bed. The first night there, I sat on the floor eating instant noodles straight from the pot because I couldn't artificial. From on all the boxes, I remember looking around that tiny room and wondering, how had my life changed so completely in just 45 days? The answer was simple. I had built my future around people who weren't building theirs around me. That realization hurt more than the breakup itself. A few mutual friends gradually stopped inviting me to gatherings. At first, I thought everyone was busy. Later I discovered Ryan and Sophie had been telling people a very different version of our story. Apparently, according to them, Ryan had tried for months to save our relationship. Apparently, I was emotionally distant. Apparently, I cared more about work than about him. Apparently, Sophie had simply been there while Ryan struggled. Amazing. The woman who helped destroy my relationship was now being praised for supporting him through an irrit. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to expose every lie, but then something inside me stopped. People who truly know your character don't need explanations. People who believe lies without asking your side were never really your people. So I let them go. It was painful, but necessary. One rainy evening I received a message from Sophie's younger sister, Ava. We had always gotten along. Her text was short. "Emily, I don't think you know everything." My heart raced. We met the next afternoon at a quiet coffee shop. She looked nervous. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this." "What is it?" She stared into her coffee. "They weren't together for 8 months. I frowned. "What do you mean? They've been seeing each other for almost 2 years. Everything inside me froze. 2 years. That meant Ryan had started cheating halfway through our relationship. That meant every vacation, every anniversary, every family dinner, every Christmas, every birthday. He had already been lying. Ava continued quietly. "Sophie told me not to say anything. She said eventually you'd find someone else and move on. I couldn't even speak. There are moments when pain becomes so overwhelming that your brain simply stops processing. Emotion. This was one of those moments. Ava reached into her purse. I think these belong to you. She handed me a small envelope. Inside were photographs. Printed photographs. Ryan and Sophie together. Different restaurants. Different weekends. Different vacations. All dated. Proof. Undeniable proof. I stared at them until my hands started shaking. Ava looked guilty. I'm sorry. I forced a smile. This isn't your fault. No. But she's my sister. You don't choose who your family is. She nodded slowly. Before leaving, she said something I'll never forget. Emily, they're happy right now because they think they won. I asked quietly, what if they did? She smiled sadly. People who build happiness by hurting others eventually pay for it. At the time, I didn't believe her. Life doesn't always punish bad people immediately. Sometimes they seem to win. Sometimes they get everything. Sometimes they post smiling photos while you're crying yourself to sleep. And that's the hardest part. Watching the people who destroyed you appear perfectly happy. Months passed. I worked longer hours. I volunteered for difficult projects nobody else wanted. I stopped going out. Stopped dating. Stopped expecting miracles. Every promotion opportunity, every training course, every certification, I said yes. Not because I had some grand revenge plan, because work became the only place where effort actually produced results. Unlike love, your career doesn't betray you. If you work harder, you improve. If you learn more, you grow. No lies, no cheating, no fake promises, just results. One evening my manager walked over while I was finishing a presentation long after everyone else had gone home. Emily, yeah? Why are you still here? I wanted this proposal to be perfect. He looked at the screen, then back at me. You know, we've been noticing your work. I smiled politely. Thank you. No. Really? He leaned against my desk. There's a leadership development program opening next month. I don't think I'm qualified. He laughed. That's exactly why you are. I looked confused. The people who think they're ready usually aren't. Those words stayed with me. For the first time in months, someone believed in me. Not because they pitied me, not because they knew my story, because of my work. I applied. The competition included over 80 employees. Only 5 would be accepted. The night before interviews, I almost withdrew my application. Fear whispered that I wasn't good enough, that I'd embarrass myself, that failure would only make everything worse. Then I looked around my tiny apartment, at the cracked walls, at the unpaid bills, at the life I never planned to live, and I made myself one promise. No matter what happened next, no one would ever have the power to destroy my future again. What I didn't know was that accepting that challenge would start a journey that would completely transform my life. Because while Ryan and Sophie were busy celebrating the life they had stolen, I was about to begin building one they could never imagine. And years later, our paths would cross again. Only this time, the power between us would be very different. People love talking about revenge like it's a single dramatic moment. A slap across the face, a public confrontation, a perfectly timed speech that leaves everyone speechless. But real revenge, if you can even call it that, is painfully ordinary. It's waking up before sunrise when every part of you wants to stay in bed. It's saying no to distractions. It's studying while everyone else is out celebrating. It's choosing discipline on the days when your heart is still broken. Looking back now, I realize I didn't rebuild my life because I wanted Ryan to regret losing me. I rebuilt it because I couldn't survive as the woman they had left behind. The leadership development program became the hardest 6 months of my life. Every weekday began before 6 in the morning. I would spend 2 hours reviewing business strategy, financial reports, and leadership case studies before work. During office hours, I carried out my normal responsibilities while completing additional projects assigned through the program. Then, after everyone else went home, I'd stay another 2 or 3 hours finishing presentations, analyzing marketing campaigns, and preparing reports for senior executives. Some nights I didn't get home until after midnight. Some mornings I questioned whether any of it was worth it. But every time I thought about quitting, I remembered the girl sitting alone on the floor of that tiny apartment, eating instant noodles and wondering if her life was already over. I refused to let that become the end of my story. The first person who truly noticed my determination was my mentor, Victoria Reynolds, the company's vice president of operations. She had built her career from the ground up and had a reputation for being impossible to impress. Employees described her as brilliant, demanding, and brutally honest. During our first meeting, she didn't waste time trying to motivate me with inspirational speeches. She simply looked across the conference table and asked, "Why are you here?" "I want to grow." She raised one eyebrow. "Everyone says that." "I mean it." She folded her arms. "No." The room fell silent. "I asked why you're really here." I hesitated. Should I tell her about Ryan? About Sophie? About everything that had happened? Something told me not to. So I answered honestly. "I'm tired of building my future around other people's decisions." For the first time, she smiled. "There you are." That single conversation changed everything. Victoria never treated me like someone who needed encouragement. She treated me like someone capable of leading. Every mistake I made, she pointed out. Every weak presentation, she challenged. Every excuse, she rejected. At first I thought she disliked me. Months later, I realized she respected me enough not to lower her standards. One afternoon she handed me a thick financial report. "I need a recommendation by tomorrow." I stared at the hundreds of pages. "Tomorrow? Is there a problem?" No, there wasn't a question. I stayed in the office until nearly 3 in the morning. When I presented my analysis the next day, she listened quietly before closing the folder. "You missed 3 operational risks." My heart sank. Then she added, "But you found 2 opportunities the executive team overlooked." She nodded once. "Good work." That was the closest thing to a compliment she ever gave. And somehow, it meant more than any award I'd ever received. Outside of work, life slowly became quieter. Not happier, just calmer. I stopped checking Ryan's social media months earlier. There was no point reopening wounds every day. Mutual friends became strangers. Some drifted away naturally. Others chose Ryan and Sophie. At first, that hurt. Eventually, I realized losing people who disappear during difficult times isn't actually a loss. It's clarity. I also started saying yes to things I had always postponed. Weekend hiking groups, public speaking workshops, business conferences, volunteer events. Not because I suddenly became outgoing, because I refused to let fear make my world smaller. One Saturday during a networking seminar, someone asked us to introduce ourselves without mentioning our job titles. When my turn came, I froze. For years, I had introduced myself as Ryan's girlfriend. Then, as a marketing coordinator, without either of those identities, who was I? The silence lasted several seconds. Finally, I smiled and said, "I'm Emily." And I'm learning that starting over isn't the same as failing. The room applauded. Not because it was a perfect answer, because it was real. That evening I drove home thinking about how much my life had changed. For the first time since the breakup, I wasn't surviving anymore. I was becoming someone new. Nearly 2 years passed. Promotions came one after another. First, senior marketing specialist, then marketing manager. Each new role brought more responsibility, bigger projects, and tougher decisions. The woman who used to apologize for sharing ideas in meetings was gone. Now I led those meetings. I negotiated contracts, managed million-dollar campaigns, presented directly to executives. Confidence hadn't appeared overnight. It had been built through thousands of uncomfortable moments. Then came the biggest surprise of all. Victoria called me into her office. She closed the door, sat down, and slid a folder across the desk. "I've accepted an executive position with another company." I smiled, despite feeling disappointed. "Congratulations." I recommended someone to replace me. I assumed she meant another senior executive. "That's amazing." She looked directly into my eyes. "I recommended you." I laughed, then stopped. She wasn't laughing. "Me? Yes. I've only been managing a department for a year. So? I'm 30. So? There are people with twice my experience. There are also people with half your ability." I couldn't find words. She leaned forward. "Emily, stop measuring yourself against other people's timelines." A week later, I stood before the executive board. The interview lasted almost 3 hours. They questioned every decision I'd ever made, every success, every failure, every leadership philosophy. When it ended, I was emotionally exhausted. For 2 weeks I heard nothing. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, Human Resources called. "We'd like to congratulate you." My hands immediately started shaking. "The board unanimously approved your promotion." I closed my eyes. "I got it? You'll become Director of Strategic Operations effective next month." After the call ended, I sat alone in my office. No cheering, no dramatic celebration, just silence. The kind of silence that comes when you're 19. Nobody else even knew you were climbing. I thought about calling my parents. Then I did. My mother cried before I even finished telling her. My father simply said, "I always knew you'd find your way." No, he was wrong. I hadn't found my way. I had built it, brick by brick, failure by failure, heartbreak by heartbreak. Later that evening, while cleaning my desk before moving to the executive floor, I opened an old storage box. Inside was the silver promise ring Ryan had given me years earlier. I had forgotten it was there. For several seconds, I simply stared at it. It no longer made me angry. It didn't make me cry. It didn't make me miss him. It was just a piece of metal. Amazing how time changes the emotional weight of objects. I dropped the ring into a donation box without another thought. Some chapters don't deserve shelf space in your future. A month after beginning my new position, our company announced something major. We were acquiring a smaller marketing agency to expand our national operations. The acquisition meant hundreds of new employees would be joining our organization. As Director of Strategic Operations, I would oversee the integration process. New departments, new managers, new reporting structures. It was the largest responsibility of my career. For 3 weeks my calendar was completely full. Meetings, budgets, staff evaluations, executive planning sessions. I barely had time to eat lunch. Then, late one Friday afternoon, my assistant knocked gently on the office door. "Emily, come in." She carried a stack of employee files. "These are the management profiles from the acquired company." I thanked her and began reviewing them one by one. Department heads, regional supervisors, project managers, everything looked routine. Then, I opened one particular folder. My hands stopped moving. The photograph attached to the employee profile showed a face I hadn't again. Unkempt it, older, slightly more tired, but unmistakable. Ryan Carter. Current position, Regional Marketing Manager. Recommended reporting structure, Director of Strategic Operations. Reporting Director, Emily Parker. I read those lines again, then again. Surely there had been a mistake. I checked the organizational chart. No mistake. No coincidence. No misunderstanding. The man who had walked away believing he was leaving me behind had just unknowingly accepted a job where I would become his direct boss. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the file. The old Emily would have smiled. The broken Emily would have celebrated. But the woman I had become felt something completely unexpected. Nothing. No anger. No excitement. No satisfaction. Just quiet disbelief at how unpredictable life could be. Still, I couldn't help wondering one thing. Did Ryan know who would be signing his performance reviews? Or was he about to walk into the biggest surprise of his career? People always imagine revenge as something you plan. They picture secret schemes, hidden cameras, dramatic confrontations, and years of plotting. But life rarely follows a movie script. Sometimes, karma doesn't announce itself with thunder. Sometimes, it simply sends an email. Mine arrived on a quiet Monday morning with the subject line, Management Integration Schedule. Attached was the orientation timetable for every manager joining our company after the acquisition. There, halfway down the page, was a name I hadn't spoken out loud in almost 3 years. Ryan Carter, 9:30 a.m. Executive Introduction Meeting. My office. 30 minutes. Mandatory attendance. I stared at the screen for a long time before closing my laptop. 3 years earlier, I couldn't imagine surviving the pain he caused. Now the universe had somehow arranged for him to walk into my office, not as my boyfriend, not as my equal, but as an employee reporting directly to me. The irony was almost too perfect. I reached the office earlier than usual that morning, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted time to organize my thoughts. I reminded myself of one rule over and over again. Be professional. No sarcasm. No personal comments. No references to the past. I had spent years earning this position. I wasn't about to damage my reputation because of one man who no longer deserved that kind of weak power over my emotions. At exactly 9:28, my assistant knocked softly. "Your new manager is here." I nodded. "Send him in." The door opened. Ryan stepped inside carrying a leather folder and wearing a navy blue suit. For a split second, he smiled the polite smile people give strangers in professional settings. Then he looked up. His smile disappeared. His entire body froze. His eyes widened so dramatically that I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. For several long seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. "Good morning, Ryan." He blinked twice as if trying to convince himself he wasn't hallucinating. "Emily." His voice barely came out. I gestured toward the chair across from my desk. "Please, have a seat." He remained standing. I didn't know." "I know." Slowly, he sat down. The confidence he had walked in with had completely vanished. I opened his personnel file. "Before we begin, congratulations on joining the company." He stared at me in disbelief. "You work here?" "I do." You mean you weren't expecting me to be your director?" He looked embarrassed. "No, I assumed as much." Another silence. I reviewed the documents in front of me as though this were any ordinary onboarding meeting. Technically, it was. "Our company has high expectations for leadership," I said calmly. "You'll oversee 3 regional marketing teams. You'll report directly to me. Performance evaluations will occur quarterly." He nodded quietly. Then, after several awkward moments, he asked the question that had clearly been bothering him. "How long have you been here?" "Almost 6 years." His eyebrows lifted. "I thought—" He stopped speaking. "You thought what?" "I thought you left the industry." I smiled politely. "No, I stayed." He looked around my office. The executive floor overlooked the city skyline. Awards lined one wall. Framed certificates covered another. My name was engraved on the office door. Director of Strategic Operations. He noticed everything. His eyes eventually settled back on me. "You've done really well. Thank you." No bitterness. No pride. Just a simple thank you. Ironically, that seemed to make him even more uncomfortable. When the meeting ended, I stood. "So unless you have any questions regarding your responsibilities," he remained seated. "There is one thing." I waited. "I'm sorry." There it was. 3 years late. 2 simple words. I studied his face. He genuinely looked remorseful. Older, tired, less confident than I remembered. But apologies don't erase history. "They say people grow with time," I replied. "I hope you have." Then I extended my hand professionally. "Welcome to the company." He hesitated before shaking it. The same hand that once held mine while promising forever now trembled during a formal shake. Life has an incredible sense of symmetry. Over the next several weeks, Ryan became just another manager under my supervision. I treated him exactly as I treated everyone else. No special treatment. No unfair criticism. No favoritism. Deadlines applied equally. Expectations remained the same. Surprisingly, he worked extremely hard. His reports were detailed. His presentations were organized. His team respected him. Professionally speaking, he was good at his job. That made my responsibility easier. One afternoon, during a leadership meeting, another executive leaned over and whispered, "Ryan's department has improved dramatically since joining us." I nodded. "He deserves credit for that." The executive smiled. "You've built a strong management team." I didn't respond. Ryan overheard the conversation. For a brief moment, our eyes met. He looked surprised. Perhaps he expected me to undermine him. Instead, I acknowledged his work honestly. Leadership isn't about settling personal scores. It's about doing what's right even when no one would blame you for doing otherwise. A month later, the company hosted its annual executive gala. Managers from every department attended. It was the first large event Ryan and I had both attended since the acquisition. The ballroom buzzed with conversations, music, and laughter. Near the buffet, I unexpectedly ran into someone I hadn't seen in years. "Emily?" I turned around. "Sophie." She looked just as shocked as Ryan had. For several seconds, she simply stared at me. "You look—" She searched for words. "Incredible." She wasn't wrong. Not because of the designer dress or the executive title, because confidence changes a person's appearance more than expensive clothes ever can. I smiled politely. "Hello, Sophie." She glanced around the ballroom. "I didn't realize." "You didn't realize I worked here?" She nodded. Then her expression changed. "I've been meaning to apologize." "Interesting. Apparently success makes people remember your phone number. I appreciate that." She looked relieved. "But," I continued gently, "I'm not interested in reopening the past." Her shoulders dropped. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness." "No, you don't." The words came out calmly, without anger, without satisfaction, just truth. She swallowed hard. "Ryan and I interrupted politely. "You don't need to explain your relationship to me. I said you don't need to." For the first time, she understood. I genuinely didn't care anymore. That realization seemed to affect her more than if I had yelled. A few minutes later, I noticed Ryan speaking quietly with her near the entrance. They didn't look like the happy couple from those old social media photos. They looked distant, almost like strangers. I ignored it. Whatever happened between them was no longer my concern. Weeks passed. Then one rainy Thursday afternoon, Ryan requested a private meeting. I assumed it was about budgeting. Instead, after closing the office door, he sat down looking unusually nervous. "I need to tell you something." I folded my hands. "Go ahead." He took a deep breath. "Sophie and I separated 8 months ago." I simply looked at him. No reaction. No questions. He continued. "We were engaged." "I see." "We called it off." Again. "I see." He looked frustrated. "Aren't you going to ask why?" "No. Don't you want to know?" "Not particularly." He stared at me. "I thought maybe—" "You thought maybe what?" He sighed. "I don't know." For several seconds, the room remained silent. Finally, he spoke again. "You were right." "About what?" "The night you left." I remembered exactly what I had said. "I hope one day you experience exactly what you've done to me." He lowered his eyes. "She cheated on me." The irony hung heavily between us. He gave a small, bitter laugh. "With someone from her office." I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even feel satisfied. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Pity. Not because he had been betrayed, because he finally understood the pain he once caused without thinking twice. He rubbed his forehead. "I never realized—" "No, you didn't. I've wanted to apologize for years. I know. I was selfish. Yes. I hurt you. Yes. I can't change that." "No." He looked up. "Is there anything I can do?" I answered honestly. "You already can." "What?" "Become a better person than the man I used to know." He nodded slowly, then stood. Before leaving, he paused at the door. "You know." "What?" "I used to think losing you was the best decision I ever made." I waited. "I've spent the last 3 years realizing it was the biggest mistake of my life." He walked out quietly. I returned to my work. No tears, no dramatic music, no triumphant smile. Just another Thursday. But I had no idea that the biggest surprise wasn't Ryan's apology. It was waiting for me the very next morning, because someone was about to make me an offer that would change not only my career, but the rest of my life forever. The next morning, I walked into the executive boardroom expecting another routine strategy meeting. Instead, the CEO smiled and slid a folder across the table. "Congratulations, Emily," he said. "The board has unanimously approved your promotion to Vice President of Strategic Operations." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I remembered the tiny apartment with the leaking faucet, the sleepless nights, the instant noodles, the tears I cried after losing the 2 people I trusted most. Back then, I thought my life had ended. In reality, it had just begun. As the room filled with applause, I realized that every painful chapter had quietly prepared me for this moment. Success hadn't arrived because life became easier. It arrived because I refused to quit when life became unfair. A week later, I held my first leadership meeting as vice president. Department heads from every division filled the conference room, including Ryan. He sat near the end of the table, with a notebook open, waiting for instructions like everyone else. I greeted the room, outlined our goals, assigned new projects, and thanked everyone for their hard work. I never singled him out. I never reminded him of our past. To everyone else, he was simply one manager among many. When the meeting ended, several executives congratulated me on the promotion. Ryan waited until everyone had left before quietly approaching my desk. "Congratulations," he said with a small smile. "Thank you, Ryan. You earned every bit of this. I appreciate that." He hesitated before continuing. "I've spent years wishing I could undo what I did." I looked at him calmly. "Some decisions can't be undone. I know. I've learned that." He nodded slowly. "I hope you're happy." I smiled, not the forced smile of someone pretending everything was okay, but the genuine smile of someone who had finally found peace. "I am." He extended his hand. "I'm proud of you." I shook it. "Take care of yourself." And with that, he walked away. It wasn't dramatic. There were no tears, no arguments, no victory speeches, just two people whose lives had gone in completely different directions. A few months later, while speaking at a women's leadership conference, someone in the audience asked me a question I had heard many times before. "What motivated you to become so successful after everything you went through?" I paused before answering. For a long time, I thought success would make the people who hurt me regret losing me. But somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't working for their regret anymore. I was working for my own future. The day I stopped trying to prove my worth to people who had already underestimated me was the day my life truly changed. The audience applauded, but I wasn't thinking about them. I was thinking about the girl I used to be. The girl who believed losing one relationship meant losing her future. The girl who measured her value through someone else's love. If I could speak to her now, I'd tell her this. One betrayal does not define your story. One heartbreak does not determine your future. And the people who walk away are sometimes making room for the life you were always meant to build. Years later, I no longer remembered Ryan as the love of my life. I remembered him as a lesson. I no longer remembered Sophie as my best friend. I remembered her as someone who taught me the importance of choosing people who value loyalty. Most importantly, I no longer remembered myself as the woman who had been abandoned. I remembered myself as the woman who refused to stay broken. People often ask if becoming Ryan's boss was the best revenge. The truth is, it wasn't. The best revenge was waking up one morning and realizing I no longer needed revenge at all. I had built a career I loved. I had earned the respect of people who valued my work. I had surrounded myself with honest friends, supportive colleagues, and a family who never stopped believing in me. Most importantly, I had become someone I was proud of. The woman who once cried herself to sleep over losing everything eventually discovered she had never lost the most important thing. She had never lost herself. She had simply forgotten how strong she truly was. And once she remembered,